All right, so are you ready for this? We're going to tackle a concept that sounds simple enough at first, but trust me, it gets pretty tricky. We're doing a deep dive on supererogation. Basically, it's about actions that are morally good, the right thing to do, but not actually, required.
Yeah, it's kind of like going above and beyond, exceeding expectations. It's those things that make you go, wow, that person is seriously awesome.
Right. But then the question is, how can something be so good, but not, mandatory? If it's the best thing to do, should we have to do it? That's what we're going to try to figure out today.
It really makes you think about the whole foundation of morality, like what it really asks of us. And philosophers have been debating this for centuries, so buckle up.
I think a good place to start is just with the word moral. We use it all the time, but it can get pretty slippery, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. We use moral to talk about what's good and what's required, but in philosophy, those are two separate things. Think of it like this. There's this compass pointing you towards good. That's axiology, all about values, ideals, the good stuff.
Okay, I'm following. So axiology is like the goal, the ultimate good we're aiming for.
Exactly. But then there's this map that shows the required path. That's deontology. It's all about duties, rules, obligations. Supererogation is kind of like going off that map, venturing out, but still guided by that moral compass.
That's a really cool way to picture it. So axiology is like, this is the ideal, and deontology is like, these are the rules, even if they don't always get you to the ideal.
You got it. And supererogation sits right in between. It's good according to that compass, but not on the map of you gotta do this.
Which brings us right back to that head scratcher. If it's so good, why isn't it required? It can't just be not bad, right? Like there's got to be something more to it.
Totally. Supererogatory acts have this special moral shine, a merit that goes beyond just doing what's expected.
So not lying is just the baseline, but actively going out of your way to help a stranger, even if it costs you time or money, that's different. That choice is key, right?
Precisely. Choice is huge here. And that's actually what makes defining supererogation so tough. How do you capture that extra goodness, that special choice? How do we differentiate it from just being, polite?
Right. It's not just about effort, it's the intention too. Which makes me wonder, if someone does something extraordinary without realizing it's extra, is it still as morally valuable?
That's a great question. It gets into this debate about merit, whether it's subjective, like part of the act itself, or if it needs someone to recognize it.
So a diamond has value even if no one's there to see it. Could a selfless act have that same inherent worth, even if no one's praising the person for it?
That's the idea some philosophers put forward. It's a fascinating debate, but here's the thing. Not everyone even agrees that supererogation is a real thing. There's a whole group of thinkers who totally reject the whole idea.
Well, hold on. Really? They think supererogation doesn't exist?
Yep, the anti-supererogationists. Their view is basically, if it's morally good, you are obligated to do it. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Doesn't that make morality feel kind of, I don't know, rigid? Like this huge rule book with no room for personal choice or anything beyond what's commanded?
It's a common critique. It kind of leads to this ideal of the moral saint, perfect in every way, but maybe lacking that personal flourishing we usually associate with a good life.
I see what you mean. Always doing the right thing, but maybe missing out on, I don't know, just being human.
That's the idea, and it seems to clash with our intuition, right? That there is something special about doing more than just what's required, something admirable about going above and beyond. But don't worry, there's another camp with a different take. They're called the qualified supererogationists, and they're kind of like the middle ground.
So they're saying supererogation exists, but it's not totally free from the pull of duty. Like maybe it's a weaker duty, something you could have a good reason to skip sometimes.
Exactly. And there are a lot of different flavors within this group. Some focus on how hard it would be to enforce some of these acts. Like some things are so demanding that it wouldn't be reasonable to expect everyone to do them.
That makes sense. Not everyone can be a superhero. Right.
Right. Others point to individual capacity. Like, not everyone can be a hero, just like not everyone's an Olympic athlete.
Mm.
And some emphasize autonomy, your right to pursue your own goals, even if it means sometimes not doing the absolute most morally perfect thing.
So even if helping someone is objectively good, we still have the right to say, sorry, got to focus on my own life right now. I get that, but doesn't it kind of dilute the whole idea of supererogation? It makes it sound more like duty with an excuse rather than something truly exceptional.
And that's the main criticism of this view. It struggles to explain why doing more than required is so special. If there's always a loophole, it loses that wow factor. But of course, there's another camp, the true believers, the unqualified supererogationists.
Okay, the champions of going above and beyond. They'd say supererogation is totally separate from duty, right? And that separation is what makes it so valuable. It's about free will, choosing to do good just because it's good.
Absolutely. It's a testament to human freedom and potential. It's not just about rules, it's about cultivating a virtuous character, aiming for ideals that go beyond what's strictly obligated.
That's awesome. It's like where morality meets true freedom, expressing your best self without a rule book dictating every move. But doesn't that make it super hard to figure out where duty ends and supererogation begins?
It's definitely not a clear-cut formula. It's more about developing a kind of moral intuition, an inner compass that guides you towards those exceptional acts of goodness.
So we've got these three main camps: the deniers, the qualifiers, and the champions of supererogation. I bet things get even more interesting when we start looking at real-life examples, right? Because who doesn't love a good philosophical thought experiment?
You know it. And luckily, there are tons of real-world scenarios we can explore, each with its own unique challenges and insights. But I think that's a story for our next installment, wouldn't you say?
You read my mind. We'll leave our listeners with that cliffhanger for now. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive into the messy and fascinating world of supererogation in action. Okay, so welcome back. Last time, we were talking all about the basics of supererogation, the idea of actions that are good but not actually required. We even met those folks who don't even think supererogation exists, the anti-supererogationists, remember them. They gave us a lot to think about. But I gotta say, I'm ready to get into some real-world examples, where things get a little more complicated.
I hear you, and I think a good place to start might be heroic acts. They really show how blurry that line can get between duty and going above and beyond.
For sure. I mean, picture a firefighter rushing into a burning building. That's got to be supererogatory.
Right. Well, that's where things get interesting. See, it's their job. They're trained for this. They get paid to do it. So does that automatically mean it can't be supererogatory?
Good point. But even if it's their duty to go into the fire, the amount of risk, the effort, that's got to go beyond what's, technically required, right?
Yeah. You're getting at something important. It's not just the external action, it's the motivation, the inner drive that counts too. Think of a soldier jumping on a grenade, saving their comrades. We don't just say, well, they were following orders, right?
No way. It's a huge sacrifice, doing something for others, even if it means, it's that deep down goodness that makes it different.
Exactly. It's about something deeper than just obedience. And it makes me think about volunteering. Nobody's making you spend your Saturday at a soup kitchen, but it's a good thing to do. That seems like supererogation for sure.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's not like the firefighter. There's no pre-existing duty to volunteer. You just do it because you want to help.
It's pure altruism.
Yeah.
You're not getting paid. There's no recognition. You just want to make things better, which is a great argument for those unqualified supererogationists. We do have that capacity to just be good, no strings attached.
But then couldn't someone argue that it's actually an imperfect duty? Like, if you never volunteer, are you failing morally, even if you're not breaking any rules?
That's a sharp observation. And it shows how tricky these concepts can be, how duty and supererogation can get all tangled up. It comes down to how we balance individual choice with that sense of responsibility to our community,
It's definitely a lot to think about. And speaking of things that create moral obligations, what about promises? Seems like even promising could have some sneaky supererogation involved, right?
You're on the right track. Promising is a super interesting case. Think about it. Even making a promise might be supererogatory. You're choosing to be obligated, even though nobody's forcing you to.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like, nobody's twisting your arm to promise to pick up your friend from the airport at 3 in the morning, right? You could just say, sorry, I need my beauty sleep. But you choose to promise, and now it's a moral obligation.
Exactly. Once the promise is made, keeping it becomes a duty. So you've got this interesting situation. Making the promise might be supererogatory, but keeping it is obligatory.
Which makes me wonder, could you even promise to do something supererogatory? Because wouldn't the promise itself kind of cancel out what makes it supererogatory? It's not beyond obligation anymore if you promise to do it.
Now you've hit upon a classic philosophical paradox. Can you be obligated to do something that's by definition not obligatory? Tricky, right?
Yeah, it's giving me a headache just thinking about it. So how do we even start to unpack this whole promise thing?
Well, some folks argue it all comes down to context, The act itself, like donating a bunch of money, might usually be supererogatory, but promising to do it adds that layer of obligation and changes the whole situation.
So it's the context of the promise itself that transforms it.
You got it. But then it gets even more complicated if you think about other promises or other moral stuff that's going on. Imagine you promise to meet your friend, but then you see a kid stuck in a burning building. Do you ditch your friend and potentially save the kid? Or keep your promise, knowing the kid might? Well, it's tough.
Talk about a moral dilemma. It's like those trolley problems, but even more intense. And here it's not just about numbers. It's about all these different obligations. The ones from promises, the ones from the situation itself. It's a lot.
It is. And it shows how messy morality can be in the real world. Speaking of messy, up until now, we've been talking about supererogation as doing something good. But what about not doing something? Like forgiveness.
Ooh, forgiveness. Yeah, that's a tough one. Choosing to let go of anger, resentment, even when you have every right to be mad, that's powerful. But is it really a choice? Or is it actually something we should do?
You're asking the right questions. There's a whole debate about whether forgiveness is optional or obligatory. Some people say you have to forgive, especially if the person who messed up is, truly sorry and trying to make things right. Holding on to anger just hurts you, right? Forgiveness is the only way to heal.
That's a really interesting perspective. But then, doesn't the person who wronged you, don't they not deserve forgiveness? I mean, they did something bad, right? They should be punished, or at least you should be angry at them. So wouldn't that make choosing to forgive them like a free act of grace?
And that's what makes forgiveness so incredible. You're not saying what they did was okay. You're choosing to rise above it. It's offering a chance for healing, for redemption, a truly remarkable thing.
It's like you're not just giving a gift to the other person, you're giving it to yourself too, right?
Yeah.
You're freeing yourself from all that negativity.
Yeah, beautifully put. It really shows the transformative power of supererogation, how it affects everyone involved. And this idea of choosing not to act, it applies to toleration too, right? Like
Yeah.
not butting into someone's beliefs or actions, even if you think they're wrong and you could try to stop them.
Toleration. Yeah, that's another tricky one. It's like a parent choosing not to punish their kid for saying something offensive. They hate the view, but they recognize their kid's right to, think for themselves. Where's the line between letting it go and stepping in?
Of course, toleration has limits. We don't just let people hurt others or do things that are clearly wrong. But within those limits, we can choose not to push our views on others, even if we disagree.
It's like balancing our own values with respecting other people's right to make choices we don't like.
Exactly. And supererogation often involves navigating these gray areas where there's no easy answer, no rule book to follow. You need judgment, empathy, you need to be willing to go beyond what's strictly required. Which leads to a really interesting thought. Could there be other examples of supererogation out there that we don't even realize? Things that have become so normal, we don't even think of them as above and beyond anymore.
Whoa, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Like maybe something that used to be supererogatory way back when is just like basic decency now.
Right. What if, centuries ago, taking a bath was considered supererogatory? Now it's just common sense. It makes you wonder, how do our expectations change what we see as going above and beyond? And could individual supererogatory acts actually shift those norms over time?
Oh, now that's really making me think. This deep dive is truly bottomless. But I have a feeling we might be approaching the shore for this part of our conversation. We've covered so much already.
You're right. Time flies when you're having fun with philosophy. But don't worry, there's one more part to go. We'll explore some even more mind-bending aspects of supererogation, things philosophers are debating right now. Stuff like effective altruism and epistemic supererogation. Sound exciting.
It does, but also a little intimidating. Can't wait to hear what those are all about. Until next time, keep those supererogatory minds engaged. Welcome back, everyone. So last time, we really went deep into supererogation, what it is, the different viewpoints, and even some real-life examples that show just how tricky it can get. But as with all things philosophy, there's always more to uncover, right?
Absolutely. Remember those mind-bending twists I promised? Effective altruism and epistemic supererogation?
Oh, yeah, I definitely remember. Those terms sound a little intense, to be honest, like
Yeah.
something out of a sci-fi movie. But I'm ready to have my mind blown. So, Effective altruism. Let's start there. What's that all about?
Well, remember how we talked about supererogation being about going above and beyond in terms of morality? Effective altruism takes it a step further. It's not just about doing good, it's about doing the most good possible, making your efforts really count.
That makes sense. If you're already going the extra mile, you might as well maximize the impact,
That's
right?
right.
But how do you even measure that? It's not like there's a moral scoreboard keeping track.
You've hit on the key challenge. Effective altruism encourages us to really think about consequences, to consider things like, is this the most cost-effective way to help? What kind of impact will this action actually have?
So it's like if you're donating to charity, do you give to the local animal shelter or to an organization fighting hunger overseas? If you're volunteering, do you tutor kids in your neighborhood or build houses in a developing country? It's about making those tough choices, huh?
Precisely. Effective altruism asks us to look beyond our immediate surroundings and see where our actions can create the biggest positive ripple.
I can see how that would be really helpful, but also kind of overwhelming. Suddenly, every good deed becomes this big calculation to find the best possible outcome. Doesn't that take away from the joy of just wanting to help?
That's a common concern, and it's important. Some critics worry that effective altruism can lead to paralysis by analysis. We get so caught up in optimizing everything that we lose sight of the human element, the compassion, the connection.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about our responsibilities to those closest to us? If we're constantly trying to save the world, do we end up neglecting our families and communities? It seems like a delicate balance.
It is. But effective altruism isn't about abandoning those close to us or ignoring local needs. It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot where we can do the most good overall. Sometimes the most effective thing you can do is focus on your own backyard.
So effective altruism adds this whole other layer of complexity to supererogation. It's not just about being good, it's about being strategic, making sure your good deeds have the biggest impact. Which actually reminds me of that thought experiment about saving one arm versus two.
Ah, yes. Derek Parfit's famous dilemma. It really throws a wrench into our intuitions about supererogation.
Ah,
So you can save someone's right arm, right? But at a great personal cost. But then you could save their left arm too with no extra effort. Shouldn't you save both?
I mean, it seems obvious, right? You save both arms. But if saving one arm is already supererogatory, then saving two has to be supererogatory too, right?
Right.
But then it feels wrong to stop at one when you can easily save both. It's like a philosophical brain twister.
It really is. It makes you question what going above and beyond even means. If the goalposts keep moving, where does duty end and supererogation begin? Some philosophers argue that the initial act, choosing to save the first arm, changes things. It creates new obligations that didn't exist before.
So it's like by saving that first arm, you've implicitly committed to saving the second one, even if you didn't consciously agree to it.
You got it. And it gets even trickier when you think about promises or other moral stuff going on. Imagine you promise to meet your friend, but then you see a burning building and there's a child trapped inside. Breaking your promise might save the kid, but keeping it could. Well, it could mean the kid doesn't make it. What's the most supererogatory act in that scenario?
Man, that's just brutal. Like those classic ethical dilemmas, but with the added pressure of going above and beyond. It shows just how much supererogation pushes our moral thinking to the limit. But you mentioned another concept last time, one that honestly makes my head spin a little. Epistemic supererogation. What is that all about?
Remember how we said supererogation is about going above and beyond in morality? Well, epistemic supererogation applies that same idea to knowledge, to beliefs. It's about going the extra mile in our pursuit of truth and understanding.
So instead of doing more good deeds than necessary, you're like acquiring more knowledge than you need. But why would anyone do that? Learning's hard enough as it is.
You're right, learning can be a challenge, but just like we admire those who go above and beyond morally, we can also appreciate those who show exceptional curiosity and rigor in their pursuit of knowledge.
Okay, I see what you mean. So instead of just accepting the text by explanation, you dive into the research, you consult multiple sources, you question everything. You really wrestle with the ideas until you get a deeper understanding, like intellectual weightlifting, right?
You nailed it. Epistemic supererogation is about pushing beyond those basic requirements of being rational, of following the evidence. It's about embracing that intellectual curiosity, that critical thinking spirit.
It's like the difference between a casual reader who skims the headlines and a scholar who spends years studying ancient texts to uncover hidden meanings. Both are engaging with knowledge, but on completely different levels.
That's a fantastic way to put it. And just like moral supererogation, this intellectual version can have a ripple effect. It can inspire others to think more deeply, to raise the bar for intellectual discourse.
I love that idea that one person's intellectual curiosity can set off this chain reaction of deeper understanding and new knowledge. It's like supererogation isn't just about individual actions. It's about building a world that values that striving for excellence in all its forms.
Exactly. It shows how interconnected all these aspects of being human are: the moral, the intellectual, the social. Supererogation isn't just about isolated good deeds or brilliant discoveries. It's about contributing to a world that encourages us all to reach higher, to be better versions of ourselves, to push the boundaries of what's possible.
Man, this deep dive has been a wild ride. We started with this seemingly simple concept, and we've gone through all these thought experiments, talked about charity, heroic acts, promises, forgiveness, even touched on epistemology and how social norms change.
And through it all, I think we've seen how supererogation really forces us to think differently about morality, about knowledge, about our own potential for good. It really gets at the heart of what it means to be human, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's been challenging, but also so incredibly thought-provoking. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big thing we want our listeners to take away? What should they be thinking about as they go back out into the world armed with all these new ideas?
I think the most important thing is to remember that supererogation is more than just a concept, more than something you read about in a philosophy book. It's a call to action. It's an invitation to embrace those possibilities of going above and beyond, both in our moral lives and in how we approach knowledge and learning.
It's about recognizing that we have a choice. We can settle for just doing the bare minimum, or we can strive for something more. We can choose to be the kind of people who don't just follow the rules, but actively look for ways to do good, to learn, to contribute to something bigger than ourselves.
Well said. So go out there and be supererogatory, question assumptions, push those boundaries, be kind, be curious, and above all, choose to make a difference in the world. Until next time, happy deep diving.